So joining us now for more, Joe Lavorgna. He's counselor to the Treasury Secretary. Joe, it's so nice to have you here as always.
Thank you.
What can you shed more light on for us right now where we sit with all of the meetings that the Treasury Secretary is having, the meetings that we believe that the President Trump himself is going to be having? I mean, do you expect a real deal with real details that the American public will actually know about when those meetings commence?
Thank you again for having me. As the Secretary mentioned this weekend, they've made very good progress. I believe it's the fifth meeting he's had with his Chinese counterparts. And President Trump has a very good relationship with President Xi. And I can't go into details. We can't get ahead of ourselves on that. But I think as the framework that Eamon mentioned is very important. In other words, there's very strong, constructive discussions going on. And I'm optimistic that we're going to see something in the coming days and weeks that certainly people will have a little more details on. Certainly the financial markets are forward-looking, Courtney. They're at a record high today. And I think the markets rightly understand that the administration has leverage and the Chinese want to work with us to do what's best for everyone.
I mean, I think many of us that are hopeful for the markets think that, or at least hope that that is true. But I also think the markets have had to sort of do their own due diligence and figure out ways to digest through some of these headlines before we really have some of those details. I mean, are there things that China has suggested that they can give us that the American people would actually be happy with in an actual negotiation?
Well, obviously, the administration wants access to the rare earths. And we do have export controls in place to make sure we protect national security. Right now, the hope and desire of President Trump wants to reinvigorate and reindustrialize the manufacturing base in the U.S., and tariffs are a key instrument in that. We're running, it looks like October might be a record all-time month in terms of tariff duties, well over $30 billion, over $360 billion at an annual rate, maybe $400 billion. And China is paying a substantial portion of that. The key point here is that both sides are talking and there's progress being made. And given the connectivity and the supply chains and all the other things that Secretary Besson is dealing with, Courtney, I mean, these aren't just things that can be settled very quickly, but there's been progress being made. And in the interim, we're generating a tremendous amount of revenue. At the same time, we've got a lot of commitments that come into the U.S. from other places, because it's not just what's happening with China. You know, President Trump has initiated a peace accord between Cambodia and Thailand. That is historic. We're making tremendous progress with the South Koreans on a trade deal. So despite the government being closed, the administration is working tirelessly to really deliver on all its economic plans.
And to your point about the commitments, I think that is something that is hopeful, but we hope that commitments actually turn into real deals, real investment, things that really move the ball forward in a way, frankly, that can be measured, because I know sometimes there's big talk, but is it actually going to happen? And I understand it's complicated, but, you know, so-called Liberation Day was April 2nd. Here we are. It's almost November.
It is. But again, you know, when the markets were worried about selling of U.S. assets, you've got 10-year yields down 50 basis points. You've had a record recovery, historic recovery off of a 15% correction in the S&P. You've got GDP in the second quarter, excluding the government, was up 4.5%. Q3 GDP looks like it probably also grew at 4%. Unfortunately, the Democrat-induced shutdown is hurting the economy. We could be losing upwards of 0.2 of GDP per week, and hopefully we'll get that back. But, you know, the longer we go without key government data to make decisions, whether it's the Fed or whether it's businesses planning, Courtney, that's going to be a problem. But, you know, as you talk about the details, just want to say something. You know, these things take time. On the one big, beautiful bill, the Office of Tax Policy and IRS are working on guidelines for the full expensing of factories. That's a unique, novel approach. That needs to be done. This government needs to be reopened. The Democrats have to help us on this so that this can get done by year end, because they're going to get a huge industrial building boom in 26.